Welcome to the Deep Knowledge Dialogues podcast. This is our very first deep dive in the series, Mental Disorders and How to Treat Them.
Great to be starting this series.
Yeah, and today we're tackling, well, a really complex one, Dissociative Identity Disorder, or D. It often sparks, a lot of confusion.
It really does. Misconceptions abound.
Exactly. You've sent over some fascinating material history, research, expert takes, even some powerful personal stories. So our mission really is to unpack it, separate fact from fiction.
And just a reminder for everyone listening, all the sources we're discussing and a summary, they're right there in the episode description.
Perfect. We want to give a clear, insightful understanding.
Absolutely. It's crucial we approach this carefully. We need a genuine understanding, looking at its history, current views, and what it actually means for people living with it.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The basics. What exactly is dissociative identity disorder?
Well, simply put, DID, and you mentioned it used to be called multiple personality disorder. It's a pretty rare mental health condition. It's characterized by having two or more distinct identities, or personality states, you could say.
Distinct identities, so different ways of being.
Yeah, different ways of experiencing the world, interacting with it. Each one can have its own thoughts, feelings, behaviors, unique patterns.
So it's more than just like having different moods or facets of your personality. These are really separate ways of being.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the key thing, the really fundamental part to grasp, is where it comes from.
The root cause.
Yes. The vast majority of cases, they develop directly from severe psychological trauma, usually in early childhood.
Trauma, like abuse.
Often, yes. Extreme, repeated abuse, physical, sexual, emotional. It's that intense trauma that can kind of lead the mind to develop these different identities. It's a coping mechanism, really.
Wow. A way to sort of compartmentalize the unbearable.
Exactly. A powerful way to manage experiences that would otherwise be completely overwhelming.
Yeah, profoundly sad, but you can almost see the logic.
Yeah.
This isn't something new, right? Your sources mentioned it's been recognized for a while.
Oh, yeah. Definitely not new. It's been observed, documented for quite some time. Pierre Janet, a French psychologist, he's often credited as the first to give detailed clinical descriptions back in the late 19th century.
Late 1800s, so over a century ago.
Well, over a century, yeah. The study of it goes way back.
And then, I suppose in the 20th century, it really hit the public consciousness, those books and films.
Yes. Sybil, The Three Faces of Eve, they certainly brought the idea into popular culture.
Huge impact, I imagine.
Huge. And while it raised awareness, it also, unfortunately, led to a lot of sensationalism, often pretty inaccurate, overly dramatic portrayals.
Right, those were very dramatic stories. And after that, there was a big shift in understanding even the name itself.
Yes, exactly. In 1994, the American Psychiatric Association officially changed the name from multiple personality disorder to dissociative identity disorder.
And that wasn't just semantics.
Not at all. It reflected a real evolution in understanding. The idea that these aren't truly separate, independent personalities living inside someone.
Okay, so what are they then, if not separate personalities?
They're now understood more as fragmented expressions of a single self, a core self that's been fractured, you could say. The key is dissociation, the mind compartmentalizing, putting up barriers around trauma.
That name change really clarifies things. It's not multiple people. It's fragments of one person dealing with trauma. Okay, so given those dramatic portrayals, how common is it, really? Your sources suggest it's actually quite rare.
You're absolutely right. Despite how often it might pop up in fiction, DID is actually one of the rarer mental disorders.
How rare are we talking?
Well, the estimates vary a bit study to study, but they generally range somewhere between 0.01% and maybe 1% of the general population.
So potentially very rare.
Potentially very rare indeed. Significant, yes, but not common.
And there's a gender aspect, too, I saw. More women diagnosed?
That's true. It is diagnosed more often in women. And there's a very strong link in those cases to histories of childhood trauma. That's not to say men don't experience it. They certainly do. But the statistics show a difference.
And something else striking from the sources, misdiagnosis, seems common.
That's a really critical point, actually, because the symptoms can be complex, varied. It often gets mistaken for other things initially.
Like what?
Like depression or maybe bipolar disorder. And the sad result is this can lead to really significant delays, sometimes years before someone gets the right diagnosis and the right help.
Years without the right support.
Yeah.
That's tough. Which brings us to some of the newer research. It sounds like science is giving us, well, deeper insights now. neurologically.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a 2022 study, I think it was in the Harvard Review of Psychiatry, that highlighted those diagnostic delays up to 7 years often.
7 years.
Yeah, a huge amount of time to be struggling without the proper support. But maybe even more revealing is the work with advanced neuroimaging, like fMRI.
Functional MRI.
Yeah.
Seeing the brain in action.
Exactly. And these studies, they've actually managed to identify unique, consistent patterns of brain activity linked to the different identities within the same person.
Wait, really? So you can see different activity when different identities are present?
That's what the research suggests. Distinct, repeatable patterns. Different neural networks seem to be activating.
Wow. That's remarkable. It goes beyond just someone saying they feel different.
Yeah.
There are actual neurological correlates.
Precisely. It provides tangible scientific validation for their lived experience. It really helps move the conversation beyond just subjective accounts and, frankly, challenges some of the old skepticism.
So it offers pretty compelling evidence for a neurological basis then.
That's
Counters that idea that's just
true.
imagined or something.
It absolutely does. It shows real biological differences in brain function that we're only just beginning to understand properly.
Okay, so how is treatment approached now? It sounds like the goals might not be what people assume.
That's a good point. Yeah, studying the Journal of Trauma and Dissociation really emphasized this. The main goal of effective therapy isn't usually about, like, eliminating the identities.
It's not. What is it then?
It's more often about integration, helping these different identities become a more cohesive, unified sense of self.
Integration. Does that mean they all merge into one?
Not necessarily, no. For many, it's more about fostering better communication and cooperation between the identities, helping them work together, reduce that internal conflict.
So more collaboration inside.
Exactly. Creating a more cohesive self, reducing distress. It's about internal harmony, perhaps.
That feels much more nuanced and maybe more compassionate than the popular idea of just getting rid of them.
I think so. It respects the idea that these parts formed for a reason, even if that reason was survival.
Right. Now, you pulled some really powerful quotes from experts in the sources. They add such a human perspective.
Yes, Dr. Bethany Brand, she's a well-respected trauma psychologist. She said something very striking. People don't choose to have multiple identities. It's the brain's way of surviving what is otherwise unbearable.
Wow. It really lands. It underlines that involuntary nature, the connection to trauma.
It really does. It cuts through any sort of notion about control or choice in conditions like this.
Absolutely. And there was another one from a researcher at the National Center for PTSD.
Ah, yes. They said, DEED is a psychological response to overwhelming pain, not a dramatic behavior as often portrayed in media.
Which directly tackles those media portrayals, right? This sensationalism.
Directly. And that's so important because those portrayals cause real harm.
Which leads us right into why this is such a sensitive topic. The media's role seems pretty significant here, and not always in a good way.
Regrettably, yeah. Film, TV, they often go for the dramatic, the scary, portraying people with DID as dangerous, unstable.
Creating fear.
Exactly. It fused societal fear, misunderstanding, even ridicule sometimes.
And that confusion with schizophrenia doesn't help either, does it?
Not one bit. They're completely different things, though both serious conditions. Schizophrenia is fundamentally about psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, a break from reality.
Whereas DID is about identity.
It's about the fragmentation of identity stemming from that trauma response. The confusion comes from that old term split personality, which people wrongly connect to the split mind idea in schizophrenia. But the split means totally different things.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction. And all this stigma, it has real-world consequences for people with DID.
Tragically, yes. The stigma is so intense that people often hide their symptoms. They're afraid of being labeled, misunderstood, even by therapists sometimes.
Hiding it even from therapists. That must make getting help so much harder.
It absolutely does. It creates huge barriers to getting an accurate diagnosis and the support they desperately need.
This just highlights how vital accurate information and empathy are. Your sources had that great section, the 5 key questions and insights. Maybe we can recap those, starting with the DID versus schizophrenia point again.
Sure. So to be really clear, DID involves a split or fragmentation of identity. It's a complex coping mechanism for trauma. Schizophrenia involves a split in thinking, a disconnect from reality, often with hallucinations or delusions.
And the word schizo, meaning split, causes the mix-up.
Pretty much, yeah. But the split refers to completely different psychological processes. Very important to remember.
Got it. And the media's influence. How does that feed the misunderstanding?
Well, like you said, the sensationalism. Movies, TV shows often focus on violence, instability, which just isn't the reality for most people with Betty. It fuels fear, stigma, even sometimes within the mental health community, unfortunately.
It's crucial, then, to keep stressing that DID is a trauma response, right? Not attention-seeking or anything like that.
Absolutely fundamental. Dissociation, the development of alters, it's a protective mechanism. The brain's way of coping with unbearable trauma, especially during childhood, it's survival, not weakness, not manipulation.
Okay. And for someone who does get diagnosed, what does a stable life look like? What's the goal of therapy, really?
It's really important to know that with the right therapy, people with DDI absolutely can live stable, meaningful lives. The goal, as we discussed, is often integration or at least better internal harmony.
So not erasing parts of themselves.
No, more like helping the different parts communicate, collaborate, building a more unified self that can navigate life with more resilience, less internal conflict, greater well-being, essentially.
And finally, what can we as a society do better? How can we offer real support?
Well, several things come to mind. First, just promoting awareness. Accurate education about what DDI actually is, and just as importantly, what it isn't. That's key to breaking down stigma.
Education first. Makes sense.
Second, really listening. Listening to people with lived experience without judgment, validating their reality. And third, ensuring access to the right kind of care. Trauma-informed care, specifically designed for dissociative disorders.
Trauma-informed care. That sounds critical.
It absolutely is. Ultimately, empathy has to start with understanding, right?
Right. That's very practical advice.
Yeah.
Now, the sources also included some really inspiring stories. Individuals thriving with DID. These seem so important for challenging those negative stereotypes.
Oh, incredibly important. Take Kim Noble. She's an artist in the UK, lived with over 20 identities. She found art therapy incredibly helpful, found stability through support, and now she actively works to raise awareness.
Using art as therapy and advocacy. That's amazing. And then there was Trudy Chase, author of When Rabbit Howls.
Yes, Trudy Chase. An astounding story. She lived with, I think it was 92 different identities, 92, and she made this courageous choice to coexist with them all, became a really powerful advocate for abuse survivors.
92. Choosing to coexist. That speaks volumes about resilience.
It truly does. Her story really shows the potential for finding a way forward, even with such complexity.
And then, maybe more widely known, Herschel Walker, the NFL star.
Yes, Herschel Walker. He spoke very openly, very bravely about his own experience with DID, about going through therapy. He's become a really influential advocate for mental health awareness since then.
Showing incredible strength and vulnerability.
Exactly. His story and others like his demonstrate that DID can affect anyone, even highly successful people, and that seeking help and speaking out is a sign of strength.
These stories, they're just so vital. They put a human face on the condition, offer real hope, show that recovery and a full life are possible.
Absolutely. They stand in such stark contrast to those negative, fear-based narratives we see too often. They show that a meaningful, productive life with DID is achievable.
Well, this has been a really significant deep dive into dissociative identity disorder. We've really drawn on all those valuable sources you provided. We've looked at the roots in trauma, the challenges of diagnosis, the impact of stigma, but also the potential for healing and stability.
And I think if there's one core message to take away, it's that DD isn't a choice. It's not instability for its own sake. It's a complex, often quite creative psychological response to surviving extreme childhood adversity.
Understanding that really feels like the first step.
It's the absolutely crucial first step towards empathy,
Right.
towards providing effective, compassionate support for people living with this condition.
Definitely. And thinking about the courage of people like Kim Noble, Trudy Chase, Herschel Walker, it really does challenge those negative stereotypes head on. Their willingness to be so open, share such personal experiences. It's incredibly powerful. It offers such a strong message of hope.
It really does.
You know, what is that vulnerability, that strength they show? What does it suggest about our potential, maybe as a society, to reduce stigma, to foster a much deeper, more nuanced understanding of the incredible complexities of the human mind? Something to think about, perhaps. Thank you for joining me for this incredibly important deep dive.